I don't really know how to start this video. I've tried to make it a few times, but I've been wanting to make it for a while, just explaining where I've been and the future of how I want to take things, regarding my music and my art in general, or, you know, just anything that I want to do. Um, because I feel like what's happened in my life and what's been happening to me, like, you know, uh, the past, I don't even know how long at this point, but there's just been a string of events. And I feel like it's important to speak on because not only do I feel like people could probably relate, and I don't hear people talk about, what I'm going to talk about too much, but also because I feel like it it's a big reason why I started doing what I'm doing. Um, you know, I think that I don't really know where to start with it, but I think there's just been a lot of things that started, you know, in middle school uh, that were instrumental to me wanting to make music and me pursuing the path that I pursued. Um, and I think like I've needed to give an explanation to my headspace for the longest time because um, I think what I'm doing looks very like unprofessional right now, or you know, it just looks like some motherfucker doing some shit, like the same as everybody else, and that's not what I wanted to start this off as, musically. I never wanted to start my music career just being like everybody else, and I feel like an explanation would get to that, but I feel like I'm saying that shit too much. But I think back in like middle school, I guess I'll just start off. Like back in middle school was when I really started to notice that like I was different from the people around me. And not too different. Like there was people that were like me, and there was people that are more different than me and definitely have worse conditions. I'm not saying that I was the weirdest kid in school, or I don't know, other people had it really bad, but I feel like my experience was unique in the way that I was friends with a lot of people, but I could tell that I like thought in a different way. And I've thought sometimes, you know, maybe I have like undiagnosed mental health conditions, I don't know. But I feel like my brain has always like worked in a different way. Um and for one reason or another, I think that people really like uh you know they weren't giving the level of loyalty that I was expecting in people. I really accumulated 4 friends, and then one in another country, or not country, state, one in another state. I accumulated about like 5 friends that are real friends, which that's more than some people have. And I'm very lucky for that. In fact, that's more than a lot of people have. And I'm so thankful for that. And that's one of the reasons I keep going. Um, but the the wide majority of the people I didn't get along with, which that's a classic thing. But for some reason, it affected me a lot. Um, in a weird way, like some people could say, it's egotistical, or, that I'm thinking too much about myself, which, I mean, that's a perspective you could have, but I felt like people weren't matching the level of loyalty that I really expected in somebody. And I almost gained this resentment, towards the world, like, towards a lot of people. And I feel like a big reason I started to make music and make art and everything like that was because out of spite of everything, because I felt like my family wanted me to be something and the school wanted me to be something that I wasn't. And I felt like I wasn't what they wanted me to be, but that kind of sparked the thought of, like, who am I then? If that's not who I am, then who am I? And I got really inspired by people online who were, making it, who were making a fan base and a community. Not a fan base. I don't even want to say fan base. Like, more like a community based off of the art that they would make. And, I got really inspired by that concept of that somebody just at home and not, some professional person could really make it. And I feel like, from that point, there was a lot of, like, adults and, like, I expected it from the kids or students or whatever that I was around, this level of, like, immaturity or whatever. But mainly there was a lot of, like, adults that I felt like, weren't giving the right message. They tried to use me as an example. And I wasn't even, the bad, like, a horrible kid. Like, there was worse people, what I mean? But for whatever reason, a lot of teachers honed in on me to use me as an example of, like, what not to be. And, like, I'm not gonna lie, I think that kind of had an effect on my thought process of things. Because a lot of these people are fucking losers. A lot of these people, even if they do have the career path or the type of lifestyle that the, teachers or whoever it may be in their life is pushing, most of the time, they're fucking whack as shit. I wouldn't want to be them. Like, I see their life and it makes me depressed. But that's crazy because to these people, that's the end all be all. Like, especially like a place like this. You know what I mean? That's the end all be all to some people because it's a nice place. You know what I mean? It's a place to raise kids. It's a place to, I guess, like, settle down or something. But, it's not where I wanted to take my life. And I started to make art and everything to really encapsulate my own sound and make my own community. And that's what I've been trying to do for probably like the past 5 years or something or so. But sometimes I look at my work and I think this isn't 5 years of progress. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I could have progressed more. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I have that I'm gonna release, and you know, I don't really know a proper way to start like rollouts or anything, but I have 3 projects that I'm gonna release. And I've been stuck on one song, and I've been feeling stagnant for the past probably like month or like month and a half, because there's been a string of events that has happened in my life, and I feel like other people could relate, you know, because there's probably stuff like this that happens in other like people's lives without a doubt. You know, that I feel like I just need to speak on. Like, you know, first, you know, I started to get into it, you know, with my dad and everything, because I was, you know, struggling with school. Because the older I got, it felt like the worse it got with what I was talking about. You know, these people tried to use me as some kind of example instead of actually, you know, I almost feel like if I had, you know, there were some teachers that were looking out for me, and if all of them were like that, then I feel like it would have been different. But there were these teachers who would like follow me around, and you know, they would like try to make me do things in front of the class as like some kind of example. Like, if my things weren't organized, they would put me in front of the class and be like, this is what not to do. And I wish I was making that up, you know what I mean? Like, I wish that was an over exaggeration, you know, but it's just the truth, you know. It's what's happened in my life. And, you know, I feel like how I said before, like, I've never completely thought like other people in a way I kind of can't describe. Like, I don't know how to describe. I wish I could, but, you know, and I feel like things like school and those teachers, it wasn't necessarily school, but it's more like those people. They, you know, they molded the way that I thought about things. Because, I mean, in all seriousness, it's like, what type of bullshit is that? You know, it's like, I'm trying to get through school, but then there's these people that are like out to get me. You know what I mean? And then it was like in my family, there was these people that were out to get me. And all for like no reason. You know, I've always never felt like I've really belonged, because in my family, you know, like, I'm half Dominican, half white. So, you know, on the white side, I don't really talk to them that much because they have a lot of drama. And then on the Dominican side, it's like, you know, you're too white. You know what I mean? So it's like, even on the side that I was mainly, you know, I considered like my family, like that I considered, you know, who I grew up with, which was the Dominican side, like, it still felt like I was like a black sheep in a way. And like, I felt like I was just the black sheep in my family, the black sheep in my school, you know, the black sheep everywhere, you know. And like, I thought, you know, with music that I could like encapsulate that And I'm still trying to encapsulate that and just, you know, make the most of that. Because, you know, you can't just wallow about that shit your whole life, you know, regardless of how different you wish that it could be. You know, you can't try to change yourself for other people, or you can't, you know, live a lie. So, you know, instead of doing that, I tried to take the path of music and change my style to something that was more me, you know what I mean? And that changed my life completely for the better. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Because ever since I did that, oh shit, there's a wasp. Ever since I did that, you know, it's been better for me. I feel like it's been way more something that I connect with. And when I started to do that, people, the animosity only got worse. Because, you know, when you're doing your own thing, I've always said this, it's like people want to test you. They want to test if you deserve to do your own thing or not. And I mean, I'm kind of glad that it's that way, because it pushes you and pushes you and pushes you. But one thing is in my life that, you know, the string of events that happened to me, sorry, I feel like I'm very like sporadic with the way that I'm thinking about this, but there's just a lot of information. Like, the string of events that ended up happening to me was that, you know, I was struggling with school, understandably though, because, you know, these teachers, and I mean the students too, but, you know, I don't really care what they think. You know, it was mainly the teachers, because if the teachers don't like you and they're kind of unfairly treating you, how are you supposed to pass school? You know what I mean? It's like you could try to study and you could try to do whatever, and you could try to put all your time into the shit, which I wasn't. I will say I wasn't doing that, and I wasn't willing to do that, because that's ridiculous. You know, my whole life is in school. So, you know, it's stupid when these people aren't really, like, I don't know how to explain. Basically, I was given special accommodations, but even the special accommodations people wouldn't accommodate me. So it was like, you know, it definitely was something that, you know, even my grandma told me at one point, like, oh, like, if you would have said this, said that, yeah, like, maybe if I would have tried to, like, advocate for it, but it was too much. And, like, eventually my mom said, you know, let's put you on online school. Or I asked to be put on online school because it was getting too much. Like, you know, the teachers were being crazy as hell. And I feel like that's kind of a common experience. You know, and my dad kind of disagreed with all that stuff. And one thing led to another, and I got kicked out for a little while and lived with my grandparents. And, you know, when I was over there, like, I've like never really struggled with substance abuse at all. Like, there's been times where it can kind of like warp your headspace or whatever. You know, if you're doing alcohol, if you're smoking weed, you know, mushrooms, anything like that. It can mess with your head, yeah, but I've never struggled with the abuse of it or anything. And when I was over there, I think it just, you know, I was just trying to get by. You know, I was just hanging out with my grandpa a lot, helping him with a lot of things, and, you know, like smoking a lot of weed. And, like, you know, I was with, you know, somebody who over there, and where at my grandparents' house. I was with somebody who I've grown up with my whole life. And I don't feel the need to speak on him, but it was somebody who, you know, I've been around my whole life. And like, basically, and I don't know if I should use the term falling out, but long story short, I kind of like fell out with this person that I've grown up with my whole life. And I'm gonna circle back because I don't want the cars. But so yeah, I kind of fell out with this person I've grown up with. And in my opinion, I don't fully know the reason for why there were actions that were taken that led to the falling out. And I don't want to speak too much on it, but I feel like it's necessary to bring up. And when that happened, in my opinion, there are no. He acted in a sporadic way, and in my opinion, the reason why was drugs. I think that was the direct correlation. And you know, that really messed me up because he was like a really important person in my life. I think that combined with the fact, like I said, you know, I never really felt like I really belong. You know what I mean? So this person, being my family, I felt like if I didn't have anybody else, I had him. You know what I mean? But when we fell out, which I do, you know, plan to try to like reconnect a relationship with him in the future. It's just like I said, I think that it was a drug-induced thing, and I think he's going through some things right now, and I don't think it's the right time because when I got like kicked out, I was looking for a job, and when I went over to another state, I was still looking for a job, but you know, I was helping my grandpa a lot with things, so I didn't get a job. So now I'm back over here because of what ended up happening with, you know, that family member. And you know, I feel like it just like it threw me off because it's like, you know, I'm trying to get a job. Still trying to get a job. You know, things are happening with, which you shouldn't get caught on this, but a lot of things have happened with girls and stuff also where, like I said, because I feel like I never belonged in a certain way. You know, I kind of look for things in different places. Like, I look for it in my family. I look for it in girls. I look for it. And, you know, it in a way, I don't want to sound woe is me, but, you know, I just feel like it's like betrayal after betrayal. And, you know, I feel like at some point it just starts to beat down your psyche. Like, it just starts to beat you down in the worst way. Like, and I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to sound, you know, this is why a video like this is so hard to make, is because I don't want to sound like so woe is me, because there's a lot of things I do have, and that's kind of why I do the things I do and keep persevering and everything, is because I feel like my family has given me too much, and I feel like I've had too many good opportunities and good experiences to just be consumed by the bad things. So that's why I keep going. But there has always been this feeling of like feeling different that I can't shake. And, you know, especially these things that have happened with women combined with what happened with, you know, my family. You know, in a way, it's made me feel more alone than I've ever felt in my life, ever. And like, I've been trying to make art in the way that represents how I feel. And like, you know, the art lately that I've been trying to make, I do feel like is the best, like, it tops the last thing I did. And it's definitely progression. But it's some of the hardest things I've ever had to make because it's, you know, just raw. And like, my other stuff was kind of just, you know, turned up, you know, fun shit, psychedelic stuff. You know, now I feel like I'm trying to get into more serious things and more real life things, because when I first started making music, I was, you know, like a 15, 16-year-old. You know, I'm almost 20 now, you know, 19, almost 20. So I feel like there's, you know, definitely a change in tone. And it's been making me feel discouraged because even though I know that it's all part of the process, all progression, you know, I've been feeling like behind. You know, I've been feeling like stagnant because you see these people who blow up at like 16, 17, and then again, they're putting in the work. You know, they deserve it. And I'm not, you know, I'm not putting in the proper work. So, you know, I can't expect that. But, you know, nonetheless, with everything else, you know, I feel discouraged in the way of, wow, you see all these people and it feels like they're living life to the fullest. You know what I mean? While it feels like a lot of the times I'm wallowing or, you know, suffering in a way. And I feel like another thing is the place where I grew up is very nice, but the people around are very one-track minded. It's not a very creative place, if I'm being completely honest. Some might say that it is. I wouldn't say that. I would say that, I don't know, like every place has its own vibe, but this place especially is just kind of ridiculous, if you ask me. It's filled with a lot of people with a lot of money, but you know, kind of a goofy lifestyle, if you ask me. And I feel like with when it comes to like music and where I'm going with it, I'm only going up. You know, there is no doubt about that. You know, I'm definitely not quitting. I definitely haven't not been making music. I've been making a lot of music. And I've just been thinking of how to properly release it. But like I said, now I've come to a final conclusion. I'm going to release 3 projects. And one of them, which I'm going to call A Dropout's Guide to War. You know, that's going to be, I feel like, the tape that really, you know, explains what's been going on in my life, you know, in musical form. You know, what I meant by my music that I've been making has been more serious than my last shit, is because that tape is really going to cover what I'm explaining now. Because ever since what happened, you know, I made up with my dad. I got into a fight with one of my friends, and, you know, I kind of threw shots at them on one song. And now, you know, I've rekindled all that. I've made up with those people, but I still feel like it's right to drop that music of that time period, if that makes sense. Because that music really was like a documentation of that point in my life. And, I think like it really it really kind of has been taking a toll on me in a way, because it really sucks when you feel like you're always like the elephant in every room. Like when it feels like people are always looking at you expecting one thing, but you never deliver what it seems like people want. And I always, kind of contradict myself and always kind of snap into my head real fast whenever I start to think like that, and be like, there's people who have way worse, because in a way, I think all the time, like, why do I deserve to be like that? Like, that's kind of not fair, you know what I mean? Like, why do I deserve that? But then, you kind of could say the same thing about a lot of things. Like, why did the people who died in the Holocaust deserve to die? Why did the people in 9/11 deserve to die? And that's a way worse, scenario than what I'm going through. So it's like, I can't trip about nothing. Or even about my family that came before me and what they had to do, to just survive, And I think a lot of the time, just being alive beats me the fuck up, because I feel like I came from a lot of really strong people. And even though sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but, I came from some strong people. So, I feel like a lot of the time it's this burden I have to carry on my shoulders. Like, how do I be better than my parents? How do I be better than my grandparents? How do I be better than my great grandparents? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot. And I feel like a lot of the time people think that I just could give a fuck less, because that's what I would rather portray than just portray the amount of depression or anxiety or whatever it is, that I'm feeling in the moment. Because, to tell the truth, like, I hate getting out of bed. I hate fucking talking to people. I hate the way that things have gone. I hate the way that things, it's like, sometimes I feel like my whole life has just been one big fucking mistake. You know what I mean? But I feel like, sometimes, the most fluke mistakes lead to, the biggest victories, the biggest progression in society. You know what I mean? Like, who knows, the mistake of my life could be a shockwave. This fucking guy with his car, you know what I mean? But it's like, my life could be a shockwave to help other people. Or not even just that, but change the world. I feel like that's kind of been what I aspire to do, is just make, even if it's a small, wave, I want to make some kind of footprint that I was here, and some kind of mark on the world. And I think that, feeling like I don't belong and stuff has always discouraged me, because some people think that, oh, the way to leave your mark on the world is to have a kid. To tell the truth, I don't think that I could comfortably have a kid. I don't think that I get along with people enough to be able to if I had a kid, I would want to give that kid a mom. and I don't think that I'm mature enough, or maybe I am, maybe it's just the people I've been with. I don't know. But for one reason or another, I don't think that, at this point in my life, at least, I would be able to have a kid with somebody and actually give that kid a good life. In a way, I almost feel like I'm too selfish. I feel like I've always, whether it's been like a survival tactic or whatever, I've always put myself first. Because since I've always felt different, nobody else is going to have my back. I've even seen the people I consider friends, they're still going to choose their career path, or they're still going to choose their other friend groups, or they're still going to choose whoever it is or whatever it is over you a lot of the time. And you kind of just have to deal with it. And, I feel like all that pressure has been, not only boosting me forward, but as of, lately, it's like I said, probably the past like month and a half, kind of ever since I got back here, back to my house again, my parents' house, I feel kind of like, I made things here and there, music wise, and, I made little creative things to try to push it forward and everything. But for the most part, I've been feeling kind of like beat the fuck up from life. Especially losing one of the closest people that I had around me, and just feeling like that wasn't the person that I thought it was. That's been a feeling that's worse than a lot of feelings I felt in my life. I'm not gonna lie. And I feel like I have too many people depending on me. I have too much going for me, everything like that, to let this shit hold me back. And I'm not gonna let it hold me back. But I feel like it was right to be transparent with everybody and just be honest about how I felt about life and about, things in general. Like, because I feel like, that the explanation behind why I do what I do is really what makes it what it is, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like me just doing this shit, I might just look like a SoundCloud rapper, or, somebody just doing this shit for fun. But this is really what I want to dedicate my life to. And, there's been steps going on behind the scenes, like I've said, that, it's going to pay off. Like I said, I'm releasing 3 projects because I didn't release one last year. So I feel like it's only right to make up for it with 3 this year. And, like I said, drama happened with school to the point where I'm still trying to complete school. But one good thing is I have been like putting in, the type of effort that it would take to finish school. And I do think that it will be done very soon. And I'm very grateful for my grandpa for helping me with my school, because like I said, the teachers weren't very accommodating to me. And for one reason or another, maybe it's because they didn't like the way I dress. Maybe it's because they didn't like the way I look, the way I talk, whatever it is. They wanted to use me as an example. And, I feel like all of that combined can just make you feel very bleak about the world, have a very nihilistic view on things. Like, religion is fucking only to really control what people think from the people who are, in charge of the churches. Like the people who are in charge of the churches, I know I said that kind of stupid, but the people who are in charge of, these churches, or, any type of place of worship, 9 times out of 10, they aren't actually just encapsulating what they're trying to preach. They're trying to spew some bullshit at you that comes from them, that comes from their opinions, that comes from their kind of narrative. And then it's like the government. Everybody knows this, but all it's ever trying to do is fucking exploit you. It's like, it just wants to make you work your whole fucking life and just makes you want to pay for every fucking thing. And raise the prices of every fucking thing all the time, to the point where it feels like, what's the point of even doing it? You know what I mean? What's the point of even trying? Because these people don't fucking care about you. It's like, you go to a religious place, it seems like they don't fucking care about you. They just care about how good of a person they look. You look at the government, they don't care about you. They just want to see how much money you're going to fucking bring to the table to claim that they're going to fucking, help build the fucking, they're going to help fix the roads, and they're going to help, whatever your community. And then you find out that, the government is just funding some bullshit like for their own gain, to keep the rich rich and keep the middle class middle and keep the poor poor. You know what I mean? Like, and then, like, not just that, but it feels like these fucking girls too that I've, ran into in my life, it's almost like they just don't actually care about you as a person. Like, and that might just be my choice, in women or who I've ran into. I admit that. I admit that it could just be that. But at the same time, in my defense, it's a lot of people that have either wanted to use me just for physical things, for, I guess, some type of status, anything like that, where I just look at it and feel like, why do I deserve that? You know what I mean? Like, I look at it and think, why do I deserve that? But then again, like I said, it could be worse. And that's what you have to remember with everything, is it could always be worse. So the conditions that you have right now and what you have right now, you need to make the most of it. And it's like, it feels like, damn, religion isn't looking out for me. The government that I'm paying all this money to doesn't look out for me. These girls don't look out for me, even as much as they claim that they will, and as much as they claim that they do. It's all bullshit. It's all just cope, It's all just temporary happiness, just like drugs are, that doesn't actually bring you fulfillment. It just brings you dopamine. And I feel like even the jobs that I've gotten have showed me just how deprived people can be. And, I think this all is very normal, and it just all goes into growing up. But, it just shows how deprived people can be and how much they just see you as a number. And, I feel like I said, I've always kind of thought about things in a very different way and taken things, in my mom's words, I've always taken things very hard. She told me I've always taken things very hard. I think that's a kind of good way to put it. Because, you know, that's such a bleak life. You know, it's like, why do these people deserve what happens to them? Why do I deserve what happens to me? You know what I mean? Why is any of this happening? And, you know, that kind of view has always been hard for me to shake day to day. You know, it's like when I'm taking a shower, when I'm eating, when I'm just walking, when I'm just not distracting myself, it's hard to think, what's the point? You know what I mean? It's hard to think, why am I doing all this? What's the point of even trying to do anything? You know, it's a very weird existence that life is. But I also feel like it's such a gift. You know, it's a gift to be part of all this. It's a gift to be experiencing this. So I feel like despite all the struggle, you know, despite all the disagreements, despite all the exploitation, you know, despite almost the discarding and discrediting of my feelings also, you know, because people will always find one way or another, whether it's my family or these teachers or, you know, a fucking pastor or somebody like that. You know, they always find a way to tell you that what you're feeling is some bullshit, and you shouldn't feel the way that you're feeling because, oh, you have it good, and you know, you should just focus on little things, and you shouldn't try to put the whole weight of everything on your shoulders. And they tell you stuff like that, but then at the same time, the weight of everything is on your shoulders. You know, you can't cope your whole life. You know, you can't pretend like this isn't what it is. You can't pretend like, you know, you aren't supposed to be better than your parents. I mean, what kind of fucking person are you? You know what I mean? If you aren't better than who came before you, or you don't at least even strive for it, then what the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? So of course that weight has to be on my fucking shoulders. And of course there's going to be some sadness that comes with it. But I feel like I've always thought that that's pretty normal. You know, I've always thought, despite the fact that I don't really see people think about it in the way that I think about it, I think that it's for a reason that I do think about it in this way. And I think that, you know, I wouldn't change it for anything. And I think that even though I might take a break sometimes, or it might seem like I'm taking a break, or, you know, there's long stretches where there's an album just not coming out, or it seems like I've gone AFK from the whole internet, you know, I'm really working on things behind the scenes, and I'm never giving up on anything. Because I remember in middle school when, you know, a counselor, you know, took me down because things that a person said and misconstrued, and the counselor told me like that, oh, like, she thinks from what, you know, are you gonna kill yourself? Are you gonna, you know, she was saying stuff like that, like asking me if I'm gonna hurt myself, asking me, and all because these people, in my opinion, intentionally misconstrued what I said just to outcast me more, because they felt some type of animosity for whatever reason. And I remember that this counselor said, oh, are you gonna kill yourself? And I said no. And, you know, the counselor was kind of like, okay, well, from what you said, okay, I don't think you will, but I have to call your mom. I said, no, please don't call my mom. Like, that's the last thing, because, you know, she's not going to understand. You know, they're not going to understand it, you know, because that wasn't a side that I have ever fully showed. And, like, she still did. And I remember to this day, you know, my mom just crying. and, you know, her feeling like disappointed. And I came home, and I remember I told her that that would never happen again, that I would never be manipulated in that way ever again, and I would never be taken for granted ever again, and I would never let that be who I am ever again. Just the person who, you know, is trying to fit in and, you know, try to lean on people. And sometimes I almost feel like, you know, I'm going back to my old ways, you know, when I try to lean on a girl or lean on anything. You know, I feel like I can't depend on anything or anybody, because it's never going to make you feel fulfilled. Only you can make yourself feel fulfilled. So, you know, I think at some point you have to be a fucking man. You know, at some point you have to be like, this is what it is, and I am going to complete the thing that I sought out to complete. And I'm not going to break my promise that I told my mom, you know, all those years ago in middle school. You know, when I said I'm never going to let this be the person who I am ever again. Ever. So that's what this music is to me. You know, that's what this art is to me. You know, it's for the me that was in middle school. You know, it's for all those people that felt like that. That felt like, you know, the way that I feel. And, you know, it's for my family. It's for my friends. You know, it's for everybody, you know, that ever believed in me. You know, because I feel like I'm almost, you know, the lesser picked option. You know, it's a gamble to depend on somebody like me. So I have to let them know that they hit the jackpot by gambling on me. You know what I mean? Like, I can't let them all down. And I feel like that's the bottom line of this whole video, is that I'm not going to let everybody down. Like, I feel like I can't let everybody down. Oh my God, them fuck ass voice cracks, bro. Them fuck ass voice cracks. It's ridiculous, but like, it's the truth though. It's like, I'm not going to let everybody down. I'm not going to let myself down. You know, it's been hard, but that's what really builds character. And I feel like I'm the character. I feel like I'm the main one in this shit. You know, I can't let this all go to nothing. Who else was given this type of gift, you know? Who else was given this type of mindset? Who else was even, you know, if you know that if I can verbalize all of this, then I can, you know, see it out. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's exactly what I've been doing. And I want anybody who sees this video to see out what you feel is right for yourself. And anything in your life that you feel like you need to achieve to be the realest version of yourself, whether your family likes it, whether your fucking local pastor likes it, whether your fucking teachers like it, whether, you know, a girl likes it, whether anybody, you need to be you. You need to be you. And that's what the fuck is gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you could take my advice or not. I mean, yeah, I'm some crazy ass motherfucker in the woods, you know, just spewing some bullshit. But at the same time, you know, it's real shit, because this is real life, and it's all a gift. And the suffering that I've had to endure is all a gift. And sometimes I have to remember that. And I feel like this video is a good way to remember that. So, yeah, I feel like that's what I needed to say. That's the update on where I've been. I love you all. More music on the way. Music videos on the way. Art on the way. Life on the way. Let's go.